Good afternoon and welcome. In the vast tapestry of life on Earth, one of the most fascinating aspects is culture. But what exactly is culture? And is it something unique to humans, or do other animals possess it too? Join us as we embark on a journey to explore the rich world of culture within the animal kingdom. Today we will be investigating culture amongst primates, cetaceans, birds, and a range of other species. So what is culture? In terms of humans, it is considered to be the ideas, customs, and social behaviour of a particular people or society. Scientists have long disputed the definition of culture in animals and formed their own conclusions. In terms of animals, it can be harder to define. If we try to define it as language, politics, morality, and institutions, it would be devalued were it attributed to dolphins or apes. Felix Keesing defines culture as the totality of learned socially transmitted behaviour. Other scientists agree that culture is built upon socially learned and socially transmitted information. The term culture does not apply to inherited genetic information or the knowledge and skills that individuals acquire on their own. Another definition is behaviour that is socially learned and acquired, shared by a member of a group or community, and persists over time. After researching this topic, my definition is that culture is behaviour that is transmitted socially rather than genetically, and persists over generations, and is not a result of adaptation to different local conditions. During the 1870s, Darwin watched bumblebees feed by cutting small holes in the base of flowers and sucking nectar out of them. The following day, Darwin observed a large number of honeybees feeding from the holes cut by the bumblebees. He recognised that honeybees must have seen the bumblebees and imitated this behaviour. Darwin was aware that social learning could play a role in the spread of adaptive instrumental behaviours throughout natural populations. This was some of the earliest recognition of social learning in animals. Now, here's Polly, who's telling us about culture in primates. Polly, over to you.
Yeah, so there are lots of examples of social learning and what we could consider to be traditions amongst animals. Some of the best examples come from primates. So scientists have investigated the cultural innovation and transmission of tool use amongst wild chimpanzees in Guinea. They found chimpanzees cracking hard-shelled nuts using stones as anvils and hammers. The species of nut used differed among different groups of chimpanzees. However, a vegetation survey did not reveal a clear relationship between the presence of specific nut species and the target species used in nut cracking. They also found that nutcracking was being learnt by young chimps through observation and interaction with their mothers and other members of the troop. Analysis revealed that individuals paid close attention to nutcracking efforts of chimps in the same age group or older, but not younger. Reliable adult models facilitated the spread of new behaviours within the community. The presence of reliable models significantly influenced the spread of new behaviours, supporting the hypothesis that observational learning plays a pivotal role in the cultural transmission amongst chimpanzees. Similarly, chimpanzees have also been observed using a twig to fish for termites. The young will observe their mother using a twig to fish for termites in a termite mound. The young chimp will then attempt to imitate and emulate this behaviour. It seems that social learning, particularly from mothers, influences the acquisition and maintenance of tool-making skills among chimpanzees. This study concluded that the variations in tool characteristics and material choices among neighbouring chimpanzee communities highlight the existence of subcultures within chimpanzee populations. Another example was that there was a 13-year-long study of 13 different social groups of white-faced capuchin monkeys in Costa Rica. This revealed that the monkeys had social conventions and traditions invented independently from one another. These traditions include hand-sniffing, body part sucking, and games. Some of these traditions lasted up to 10 years, at least one genetic generation, and 3 links in a social transmission chain. However, Perry and colleagues found that these traditions would become extinct after many years, with some traditions reappearing several years later. They found this may have been due to the death of individuals that were more likely to enthusiastically instigate the behaviour, even when other individuals had done them before. It could also be due to demographic changes such as migration, death, and rank reversals. With traditions like hand sniffing, for example, it was found amongst some social groups and not others, making social transmission highly likely and allows for ecological differences to be ruled out. They also found hand sniffing to be present in different social groups that have no migration between them, indicating independent invention. It is possible that each tradition has meaning for the monkey and may be a way of testing and strengthening the bonds between individuals. Another example would be that in 1952 on Koshima Island in Japan, scientists gave monkeys sweet potatoes. The monkeys liked the sweet potatoes, but not the sand that was on them. So in 1953, a juvenile female decided to put the sweet potato in the ocean to wash off the sand. This behaviour started to spread among other juvenile monkeys in the troop, and then mothers started teaching their babies this trick. Between 1953 and 1958, all the monkeys learnt to wash their sweet potatoes. Researchers concluded that this behaviour may be due to stimulus enhancement and not imitation and teaching. However, 6 generations later, and this behaviour continues. Recent studies suggest that sweet potato washing correlates with lowered geohelminthic infections. Therefore, this behaviour benefits the monkey. A similar thing happened when wheat grains were thrown on the beaches of Koshima Island by researchers. Initially, the monkeys tried to pick up the grains one by one with their fingers. However, one monkey decided to scoop up the wheat and put it in the water so that the sand would sink and the wheat grains would float to the top, and then they could scoop up the wheat grains and eat them. This behaviour spread until the whole troop was using this feeding technique. Critics question the significance of these observed behaviours, attributing them to human provisioning and individual learning rather than cultural transmission. However, Schofield and colleagues argue that the behaviours emerge spontaneously and show patterns of spread influenced by social factors indicating cultural transmission. While critics raise concerns about simplicity and individual learning, there is an emphasis on the role of social learning mechanisms and evidence supporting cultural transmission in explaining these behaviours. Another example was that orangutans in Sumatra and Borneo were subject of a long-term field study. They found that only 4% of variance in behavioural ecology was accounted for by genetic differences, and 25% was attributed to environmental differences. They found that differences were due to social learning and local adaptations, as they accounted for genetic differences and environmental differences. So, in conclusion, there is a lot of evidence to suggest that culture exists amongst different primate species. However, further research is needed to confirm if behavioural differences are solely due to cultural transmission or other factors.
Thanks for that, Polly. Now over to Sally to talk to us about culture within cetaceans. There is evidence of distinct dialects and foraging techniques amongst killer whale populations. Studies suggest that killer whales are capable of vocal learning, with evidence of captive killer whales learning vocal repertoires from tank mates, and wild killer whales exhibiting interpod call mimicry. Now, to address potential genetic causations of behavioural differences between groups, it's unlikely that mitochondrial DNA would code for this behaviour. Genomic imprinting systems are typically involved in embryonic development and are thought to be a result of genetic conflict for developmental resources. In group-specific behaviour, it's unlikely that genes would be the cause. Young killer whales in the Crozet Islands and off the coast of Argentina have been found to be learning feeding techniques from their mothers and other adults. The young killer whale will seclude pinnipeds so they have no escape, and the whales have been taught this by adults guiding them onto beaches and towards prey, helping them when stuck, throwing prey at them, and showing signs of encouragement. Bottlenose dolphins are capable of vocal and motor imitation, including functional tool use. This makes them the only non-human animal species where both vocal and motor imitation have been demonstrated, showing remarkable social learning abilities.
An example of tool use in bottlenose dolphins is that there have been dolphins found to use sea sponges when foraging. They use the sea sponges to cover their noses while they dig up prey from the bottom of the sea floor. This is a protective strategy, as after they are done foraging, the sea sponges are torn up by bits of coral, sharp rocks, and debris. Bacher and colleagues investigated whether the dolphins using these sea sponges as foraging tools was an inherited trait or a socially learned one. The study involved mitochondrial DNA samples from 29 dolphins that used sponges and 54 dolphins that didn't use sponges. The study concluded that mitochondrial gene variation was unlikely to be a primary driver of tool use in dolphins compared to cultural transmission. However, this study only looked at mitochondrial DNA, meaning there may have been other genetic factors that influenced tool use behaviour in dolphins. Future research could investigate this further to gain a more comprehensive understanding of the genetic basis of sponging behaviour.
Sperm whales have also been found to have different dialects within different populations. Despite social instability, stable dialects persist in sperm whale groups, suggesting complex mechanisms of cultural transmission. There is plenty of evidence to suggest that cetaceans are capable of social learning and cultural transmission. Thanks for that insightful information, Sally. Now we have a special guest, Dr. Ovi, an ornithologist who is coming to us live from the aviary. Take it away, Ovi. There are lots of different examples of social learning and cultural transmission amongst birds. For example, back in the 80s, when we used to have those glass milk bottles, there were 2 different tit species that were found to be piercing the tops of the lids to eat the cream out. Now, this behaviour spread across the UK, started off in southwest Britain and spread as the birds were teaching each other the tricks of the trade. Urban living cockatoos in Sydney, Australia were found to be opening household bin lids to access the food waste inside. Aplin and colleagues found that this behaviour was not only cultural, but they also observed the emergence of localised subcultural variants in how the birds opened the bins. Another interesting example of foraging innovation was that there were kelp gulls found in Argentina that were picking the skin and blubber off the backs of southern right whales. The number of whales with kelp gull lesions increased from 2% in 1974 to 99% in 2011. This shows the cultural transmission of this behaviour. Lastly, New Caledonia crows have been found using twigs to fish out insects from the holes in logs. Juveniles observe this behaviour from their parents, and this is how they learn to do it. Hunt and Gray suggested that geographical variation in tool manufacture across the New Caledonian crow population was evidence of the presence of local tool-type cultures. However, this was challenged as a study showed that juvenile crows spontaneously used tools in isolation. Overall, there is much evidence to suggest that social learning is passed down from generation to generation amongst birds. This shows the presence of culture among different bird species. In conclusion, there is a variety of evidence supporting the argument that culture in animals is based on social learning. There is also evidence that these cultures could evolve over time through a process of selection on variance, inheritance, and adaptation. This flow of information, skills, and techniques between individuals is a fundamental process in animal ecology. Social learning enables individuals to exploit the previous experience of others to improve individual fitness. Social learning can lead to the emergence of traditions and cultures where these learned behaviours persist over time via social transmission within and between generations. However, if we define culture as societal customs, beliefs, and ideologies, this is something that cannot be measured in animals, and ultimately further research will determine whether or not they are capable of this. Further research is also needed to rule out other factors that may have led to these cultural behaviours. I hope you've enjoyed joining us on this journey of scientific exploration. I'm your host, Isabella Mason. Thank you and good night.